today the Council accepted the decision from the Hearing Commissioners and approved the Canterbury Air Regional Plan. This is the culmination of, I guess, getting on towards 3 or 4 years of work, a review of an existing air plan. For me, it's an important component of an overall air strategy we have, which seeks to provide the people of Canterbury with clean air to breathe. And this process started off, at least 15 years ago. Canterbury's come a long way over that period of time, in particular Christchurch. So a lot of good work's been done. This new air plan has made some changes to the old one, but really they're consistent with the direction that's been in place for that 15-year period. It's been built around working with the partners we have, the territorial authorities, the Health Board, and other agencies. We've tried to write into the air plan rules and provisions that reflect the local solutions that are essential if you're going to get a community to buy into something which is quite tough in some cases. It's also enabled the introduction of new technologies, and we call them ultra-low emission burners, but essentially what that means is they're technologies that mean that the emissions that come from domestic wood burners are much, much lower than what's been traditionally in place. And we needed to have a change in the air plan to enable that to happen. And that now means that anyone in Canterbury can have a wood burner, provided it's one of these ultra-low emission wood burners, if they want to use wood as their fuel. And without that new technology, I think we would have been looking at potentially having to see wood taken out of the list of fuels that could be used by people to keep their homes warm. So this air plan, is the cornerstone of the Regional Council's strategy to make sure that air quality in Canterbury improves or continues to improve over the foreseeable future, and it's a very important piece of regulation for us. I mean, in the case of domestic wood burners in the polluted air sheds, over the last 3 or 4 years we've been running a program which has focused on getting the users of wood burners to understand the impact that their activity can have on their neighbours, and then giving them some help to make sure they use those wood burners in the most efficient way possible and produce the least emissions possible. So that's all been about an education program. It's and we've used the traditional media, the new media. We've gone to schools. We've had kindling programs which are aimed at getting the children to take kindling home and to get them to teach their parents how to use wood burners better. So our focus has been very, very much on trying to educate and trying to give knowledge. Because we know that at the end of the day, while we have the powers to prosecute or infringe people, the most effective way is to get education in place. I think we've now got to the stage, however, where we're able to much more target the people who use wood burners who cause the problem. And at some stage, when you target, you will get to the point where it may be necessary to take action against them and use the regulatory tools. We haven't had to do that yet over the last 15 years, really, and we've made great progress. But we have those rules in place. One of the good things about the plan is it's now got a very clear definition, if you like, of what pollution looks like coming from a domestic wood burner, and that's this rule that basically says you can only have visible smoke for a 15-minute period after lighting up your fire, and that's a pretty clear sort of set of parameters that mean we are now able to enforce in a much clearer and simpler way. I'm pretty confident that over the foreseeable future, with the sort of progress we're making with education programs, with introduction of new technologies and the general understanding that people have, I don't see us needing to prosecute too many people. But we do have those powers, and we will have to use them if we end up with persistent offenders.
What about in terms of farmers in Canterbury?
Okay, one of the new things this plan does is to introduce into the rural community some standards that have to be met when it comes to burning waste, burning hedges that have been pulled out, crop burning, and also the odours that come from some of the intensive farming activities and sort of dairy farm effluent and so on. And in the old air plan, we had pretty limited policies and rules in that area. We've now got something quite specific, but again, we've tried to do it in a way which encourages rural people, farmers who are doing these sorts of things, to put in place a protocol or a plan that sets out how they'll do it in a way which doesn't impact upon the neighbours and so on. For example, around the rural towns like Ashburton and Timaru, Washdyke, we now have a 4-kilometre buffer zone within which, if you wish to burn crop residue, you will have to get a consent to do so. On a wider basis, anyone burning waste of that type in rural Canterbury will have to have a burning plan, I think we call it. And that burning plan, basically, you won't need to submit that to Environment Canterbury, but you'll have to have it in place, and that will actually be a plan that says you've taken into account your neighbours, wind directions, and all those sorts of factors that can impact upon the air quality and the quality of life of people who are on the receiving end of burning. If there's a complaint made about that sort of activity, when our staff go to investigate that complaint, they'll be looking to see that that landowner has in fact got a burning plan. If they don't, it's going to make life a bit more difficult for them. If they have, and they haven't been complying with it, well, we'll be encouraging them to comply with it in the future. So we're at this stage, I think this plan basically has put onto rural people an understanding that they need to think before they burn waste, and there are some regulatory tools there that will help us to enforce that if they don't do so. I mean, we've had to do this especially around some of the rural towns because with Ashburton and Timaru, we're putting a lot of pressure on urban people, expecting them to clean up their act. But especially around Ashburton, we've had a number of complaints over the years about, well, you're putting this pressure on us, but you let those rural people just continue to burn their waste. You've got to do something about it, so that's what we're doing. Unfortunately, Timaru has come to the party late in terms of cleaning up their air quality. Where Christchurch, Rangiora, Ashburton, etc., started 10 or 15 years ago, really Timaru didn't start doing anything till about 2 or 3 years ago. And up until now, there hasn't been a regulatory framework that has required them to do anything. So that's one of the great steps with this new plan is we've now got policies and rules in place in regard to Timaru, Waimati, Geraldine, those southern townships. But to Timaru's credit, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, on a voluntary basis, with great support from the Timaru District Council, we've been able to start educating and spelling out to Timaru people what they need to do, and we've had a response. 2014, I think we had 45, 46 exceedance days. The last couple of years, it's been in the mid-20s. Now, some people will say, well, it hasn't got any better the last year. I think the fact that it's moved from 45 down to the mid-20s over the last 3 years is a significant shift and is great credit to the people of Timaru. We can also tell from the media response that we get that people are now understanding what those issues are. If you don't tell people the fact that their individual activities, burning a fire in a place like Timaru is causing a problem, they'll just carry on doing it. We've started to educate them. So I think Timaru is in pretty good shape to make quite significant improvements in the future. We've now got the regulatory framework. In that framework, it's clearly set out that from 2019, any new fires going in will have to be ultra-low emission burners, and I think if I've got the detail right, existing wood burners will only have a 15-year life in Timaru, and the rest of Canterbury under this new plan, it'll be a 20-year life. So there's little differences like that that mean that it's become a bit more urgent for Timaru to deal with some of these problems. I mean, I just emphasise too, I mean, it's been great to have the Timaru District Council supportive of what we're doing there, because one of the things we've learned is if you don't have a community and the local stakeholders supporting you, it's very hard for a regulatory authority just to impose these rules. And I'm really confident that this plan will give a little bit more teeth to the actions we've already been taking, and we'll continue to get great support from our partners down there. In Timaru, yes, you'll be able to have a wood burner, but progressively it'll have to be an ultra-low emission burner. I mean, in Timaru, we've got some specific issues we need to deal with. We still have people with open fires burning coal. Now, under the air plan, that's prohibited. I think, in fact, it was prohibited from the beginning of this year. It wasn't under the proposed plan, but it certainly is. It'll be a rule that applies from the 1st of January 2017. So, in Timaru, we have to target the areas of exceedance that we know are causing big chunks of the problem. We've learned a huge amount in the last few years but if you take out one bad wood burner in a street, you can clean up the air there quite quickly. So in Timaru, we have to do quite a lot of work to catch up because they've got the same requirements as all the other air sheds. By 2020, we're meant to be down to only one exceedance a year. So Timaru, 25 to 1 over the next 3 years, a lot of movement. But I think we've now got tools that will actually allow us to make great progress on that. People ask me, do you think you can really make it? I think we can, but it's going to be very tough. It's interesting. I think when we look at the numbers for the 8 air sheds we've got for the last winter, we now got 3 or 4 of them, in fact, that are down to the level that means that if they stayed where they are now or did better for the next 5 years, they'd become categorised as no longer a polluted airshed. So, I mean, this is remarkable stuff for Canterbury. I'm not a Cantabrian, but, when I talk to people who've lived in Canterbury for all their lives, they talk about the improvements that have been made. And, I just think everybody in Canterbury should be so proud of what they've achieved. And I think it's been done with a combination of rules. In the past, a lot of central government and ratepayers' money spent on subsidising certain activities, but really the major thing has been people have been prepared to change the way they think about heating, and in many cases shift away from wood burners, but also to progressively upgrade their wood burners. And I think it's great also now that we've now got a wood burning industry that I think there are now 8 units that have been approved, ultra-low emission burners. And of those, these are no longer just small manufacturers. We now have big manufacturers who are in this game as well. So everything is looking really, really good for Canterbury. And if you think about where we had to come from, I think it's a remarkable achievement. And this air plan just fits into, it's just another piece of that strategy to make sure that we've got the rules framework that means we can enforce stuff when we have to.